The rise of pop art in the late 1950s marked a crucial time period for the modern art movement. The brooding and soul-searching realm of abstract expressionism, characterized by the trauma of a war-stricken world, was quickly becoming obsolete as artists searched for a new inspiration, the quote-unquote post-World War II manufacturing and media boom. In fact, many artists in that time period began their work in commercial art, printing advertisements for billboards and magazines before they turned to a more meaningful outlet of expression. Instead of using subject matter that represented quote-unquote high art themes of morality, mythology, and classic history, pop artists shifted their focus towards celebrating the everyday life that revolved around mass media, consumerism, and popular culture. Andy Warhol, a New York-based artist, is most responsible for this shift of direction. Warhol's enigmatic personality, quote-unquote deft and constant use of the media, and revolutionary screen printing technique easily identifies him as quote-unquote one of the two, with Picasso, most influential artists of the 20th century. He is what Peter Wolin calls a quote-unquote postmodern Renaissance man who created an abbreviated visual anthology of commercialism, and in doing so became the kingpin in blurring the boundaries that once clearly separated popular culture and fine art. Life immediately following World War II was bleak and bitter, especially in America. Almost a third of the country was stricken with poverty. Racial segregation remained at an all-time high in the South, where most African Americans lived, and immigration was stifled. We see these dark times pre- and post-war mimicked through the art that was made in the abstract expressionist movement, fronted by Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, and William de Kooning. According to the Met Museum's essay online, quote-unquote, these young artists, troubled by man's dark side and anxiously aware of human irrationality and vulnerability, wanted to express their concerns in a new art of meaning and substance. This included creating extremely abstract and indiscernible paintings using an array of colors that served to represent mood, tone, and subject matter. In only a couple of years, the economy in America began to see a major shift, and a somewhat positive direction. Many of its citizens felt a newfound sense of prosperity that led them to believe that the social and economic problems that plagued the country could be fixed soon enough, and a new era of media and manufacturing made a boom in the cultural scene. Artists shifted quite sharply from the abstract expressionist style into what is now known as pop art, borrowing inspiration from comical and commercial image, creating artwork that represented the new consumer culture and mass media movement. And the man at the forefront of this new era, none other than Andy Warhol. According to Warhol himself, he was born a quote-unquote depression baby, eating tomato soup every day in his parents' torn-up apartment located in one of Soho's ghettos in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He had very little social interaction with kids his age, and his mother was always sick or sad or both, and he was constantly bullied by his older brothers. Warhol's parents were of Russian and Polish descent, who emigrated to America with the same hopes of any other immigrant family, to establish a better life. Yet the Great Depression devastated the country shortly after Andy Warhol's birth in 1928, and the life for the Warhols would never be the same. Andrei Warhol, Andy Warhol's father, died early on in his life, adding to the sadness he endured in his young life, just recently being diagnosed with a nervous system disease and suffering from long-term bed rest. Despite these unfortunate events, Warhol stated that this was a crucial time period in the development of his personality and his skill sets. Warhol eventually went on to study commercial art at the Carnegie Institute of Technology in Pittsburgh, becoming the director of the school's art magazine, and had two of his first artworks illustrated in design in 1948. During his last year of school, he submitted his first piece of art for exhibition and received a taste of aesthetic controversy, quote-unquote. His piece, titled "The Broad Gave Me My Face, But I Can Pick My Own Nose," was critically rejected. But after shortening the name to "Don't Pick on Me," it quote-unquote attracted considerable attention, with its facial details pointing to the idea that Warhol had painted a self-portrait where he was quote-unquote thumbing his nose at the establishment and would continue doing so throughout the rest of his entire lifetime. The painting draws inspiration from the color palettes and brushstroking style of the abstract expressionist movement, but the subject matter itself was comical and very straightforward. After graduating with a degree in pictorial design, he moved his life's journey to New York to pursue a career in commercial art, where all the magic originally began. Warhol started off his career in New York with a pretty immediate bang. In 1949, his first illustration was featured in Glamour magazine, in which he created drawings for a story called What a Success. He later went on to become an award-winning illustrator, designing various advertisements and window displays for famous companies like Tiffany & Co., Columbia Records, and Vogue. The rising consumerist culture and mass production of materialistic goods in the early 1960s proved a major inspiration for Warhol. The booming economy shifted artists into a perkier perspective and outlook on life, and Warhol fully embraced this change with open arms, playing around with different techniques of painting and printing. He drew upon his earlier days of eating tomato soup by making reproductions of the infamous Campbell's soup cans, as well as Coca-Cola bottles, all symbols of the rising economic status of the United States. Warhol's newfound silkscreen printing process revolutionized the then novel pop art movement, even contributing to its very start. Warhol, in an interview, told Gene Swenson that he quote-unquote wanted to be a machine, and this printing technique, in which he selectively chose images to repeatedly print on a canvas, allowed him to achieve this desired effect of his art looking mass-produced, just like the skinny red Coke bottles and the cylindrical Campbell's tomato soup were. Soon after, Warhol would become quote-unquote inextricably linked to the process by which he created his art. Although this process allowed him to quickly replicate images for his clients, the technique itself was characteristic of who Warhol was in the art world. Andy Warhol then went on to create his infamous screen-printed portraits of celebrities like Marilyn Monroe, Jackie Kennedy, and Elizabeth Taylor. He used acrylic paint and silkscreen ink on canvas to make the recognizable images, as well as using a silkscreen mesh to transfer his paintings over. Although the technique did not create perfect lines, as we can see in the image of Elizabeth Taylor, where the yellow from the background peeks out from underneath her stark black hair, Warhol stated that he wasn't bothered by the finished product, that it was a quote-unquote welcome indication of how chance influenced his work. This very attitude allowed for Warhol to establish himself as an unforgettable artist and pioneer of pop art. His fearlessness and excessive exaggeration of pop culture skyrocketed his career and contributed to his status as one of the most defining characters of the 20th century, especially in the world of art. Although Warhol's art was often used commercially due to its colorfully loud and comical properties, he was able to cleverly disguise what it meant to be a fine artist and a commercial artist, which in effect liberated others from the confining boundaries set forth by previous fine art-inspired movements. Aside from his artistic ventures, Andy Warhol's personality can be described as multifaceted and eclectic, to say the very least. As Peter Wolin stated in an interview about Warhol, he was a quote-unquote filmmaker, writer, photographer, band leader, celebrity actor and model, magazine editor, and publisher, and the list goes on. Warhol has also been described as quote-unquote enigmatic. His statements were often perplexing and mysterious and contradictory, but nevertheless, he maintained himself as what Stephen Koch said, a quote-unquote phenomenon, who in his muteness and passivity seemed to be a being without needs. This persona helped elevate his art to a different level, adding to the between-the-lines analyzation that grew more and more required in viewing his artwork, for it wasn't simply a mass reproduction of a soup can made for advertisement. Admiration for his artistic personality could only be heightened by realizing that Warhol was a complex being at the core. Warhol's sexuality was and still is a topic of controversy and speculation. He was known as a gay man, which during the 1950s was criminalized and shamed to the highest degree. His artwork of two men embracing was rejected because of its subject matter, but this setback did not stop the man from fully exploiting his sexuality in his artwork and in his personal life. Warhol continued creating quote-unquote humorous depictions of the male form, including the genitalia, shamelessly, proudly, and boldly. To conclude the conversation about Andrew Warhol's influence in the artistic world and the impact he had on the pop art movement is to cut a well-developed and critically acclaimed movie halfway through, providing no resolution. From his revolutionary screen printing techniques to his baffling persona in the media, the artist inspired many and disappointed none. His art remained shocking, unexpected, and aesthetically pleasing, while providing the necessary social commentary on issues like mass consumption of materialism, the newly pervasive presence of media in everyday life, and even homoeroticism, questioning the limits of sexuality and beyond. In this way, Warhol set himself up as not only the ultimate innovator of pop art, but an inspiration for the misunderstood, and his legacy is one to never be forgotten. Thank you.